Hello and welcome to yet another episode of Earth911's Sustainability in Your Ear, the podcast conversation about accelerating the transition to a sustainable carbon neutral society. I am your host, Mitch Ratcliffe. Thank you for joining the conversation today. Homelessness has been on the rise in the United States since 2015. As of 2022, a Department of Housing and Urban Development survey found that more than 582,000 people were living on the streets, about 18 people out of every 10,000 Americans. Getting off the street requires being connected to wireless services with all the technology that involves, from a mobile phone, which about 70% of the homeless do actually have, to getting access to chargers and information to find resources, treatment for medical and addiction issues, and to apply for work. Today, we welcome back Zac Clark. He's the founder and executive director of the HomeMore Project in San Francisco. The HomeMore Project has distributed a unique solar-powered backpack, the Makeshift Traveler, which features a built-in charging station and comes packed with an AM/FM radio, rechargeable flashlight, sleeping bag, and other necessities. We first talked to Zac back in January 2022, and at that time he was in college and the Makeshift Traveler was a prototype. But today, the organization has delivered hundreds of backpacks and has extended the program to other parts of California. In March, they completed their first government contract, delivering 60 makeshift travelers that were distributed to homeless veterans by the Veterans Administration in Palo Alto, California. You can learn more about the HomeMore Project and its Makeshift Traveler backpack at thehomemoreproject.org. The HomeMore Project is all one word, no space, no dash, thehomemoreproject.org. Now let's connect with the HomeMore Project to find out how it has evolved. Welcome back to the show, Zac. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me, Mitch.
Well, it's great to have you back. When we first talked, you were a University of San Francisco student working as a full-time volunteer with more than 60 interns who contributed to the design and production of the Makeshift Traveler. Congratulations on your recent graduation. How's the HomeMore Project changed? And how's it going to continue to grow while you're in grad school in Los Angeles?
Yeah, thank you, Mitch. Happy to be here. And yeah, so I finished at the University of San Francisco last Saturday, and my undergrad was in international business and marketing. And so I like to think that that sort of helped me learn that perspective of launching an organization. And now I'm going on to UCLA to do a master's in urban planning. I consider myself, I've been working full time for a few years, just without the pay part. So, our priorities just quite frankly have not been to pay me. We've been starting to compensate other people. Of course, building an organization has other overhead costs and trying to grow our program. So, our priorities haven't been to pay me up to this point.
So how many volunteers are working on the program?
Yeah, so our volunteers, I like to always break down our volunteers by including our board, including our internship program. So our board right now is about 12. Our internship program at one point was up to 60, 70 interns. Right now we've condensed it down to 20 as we shift into looking at part-time and full-time people later this year. And then we have I call an accessible volunteer base of about 75. So these are people that have reached out. They're, geographically located in the Bay Area, and they're willing and able to volunteer with short-time notice.
So you have actually got that Makeshift Traveler backpack out there. It was an idea last time. It was a prototype last time. How has it performed? Is it working up to your expectations and doing what you hoped it would?
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, one of the core points of the Traveler is the solar panel, the ability to charge a cell phone, other devices, and to stay connected to services and family. And so I think a lot of our focus when developing it was focused on perfecting that technology aspect of the pack, and maybe some quality control of other aspects of the pack weren't up to standard. And so earlier this year, after we had distributed about 100 packs in sort of a testing period from October to December last year, earlier this year, we discovered that our zippers were breaking. And I don't know if you ever had a backpack that doesn't have an operating zipper, but you basically don't have a backpack.
Yeah, it's not a backpack.
So yeah, so we spent about 3 months from January to April working with a sewing company, fixing the other 250 units that we had already made. And, you know, that aside, there's many positive stories, which I'm sure I'll get into, but that was a big challenge that we had to face this year.
Well, that's a realistic and predictable thing. It's a product has flaws, and so would you describe what you have done now as a V2 of Makeshift Traveler? And are there any other capabilities added besides the new zipper?
Yeah, so pretty much our philosophy was we just wanted to make sure that these units we had made
Mhm.
could be used, up to standard when we give them out right now. So we've yet to make another purchase order. We're planning to do that in July, and the next unit will, you know, obviously have much improved zipper systems. It will also have a um, the USB port will also be able to be charged through an outlet. So there's a battery pack in the
Oh,
backpack, and right now the only way to charge that is through the sun.
right.
Um, but occasionally people do get access to charging ports, so we want to give that opportunity to them. Um,
So now that it's in the field, can you tell us how a makeshift traveler changes a person who's unhoused? How does it change their life? And for instance, I was following the story of Thomas, who moved from the streets to a home in just a few months after getting his makeshift traveler. What's the experience of getting one?
yeah, yeah. I mean, I'll start with the Thomas story because it's entirely different from the people that we serve on
Hmm.
the day to day. We partnered with a agency in San Luis Obispo, California earlier this year, and we gave them 20 packs to give to their community. And San Luis Obispo is a very rural area, and often the people experiencing homeless there are living along creeks, they're living in the woods. So outreach, is kind of a little bit like hiking and looking for encampments.
Yeah.
And so there's a few benefits for our product in that environment. Um, as we may touch on later, but theft is a enormous issue within the community. And, people will fall asleep, all their stuff is gone when they wake up. And so we've had, a lot of our packs stolen. Um,
Mm.
and so in a area that's rural and much more spread out, it's that is a non-issue. The other thing is, Thomas had been homeless for, I believe it was 3 years. And one of the biggest challenges for him is he could never keep his phone charged because he was living along a creek bed. And so the only way to communicate with him is they would do outreach every couple of weeks and, update his case. And so when he got his makeshift traveler, he was able to constantly charge his phone. And then, that connection was the bridge that he needed to get into housing.
Now, another example is a couple living on the street named Q and Michaela. Tell us about how they've been using their makeshift travelers.
Yeah, so Q and Michaela, we connected with in March, and they actually live in a vehicle. So they have
Mhm.
not yet transitioned into, I guess the negative side would be a tent, the positive side into a housing unit. Um, their case is particularly interesting because couples that are experiencing homelessness often are not welcomed into shelter together.
Mhm.
They're separated. And so, they have chosen to decline many offers to be into shelter for that very reason. But for our makeshift traveler, they do, uh, they bike around the city a lot and do odd jobs. And so they've actually used their pack as a way to transport tools and other belongings. So there's a
Well, so now that you've got them in production, are you starting to look at ways to reduce the cost of producing one so that you can get more of these out? And what kind of progress are you seeing there?
Yeah, so when we initially developed and went through the manufacturing process, it was in just at the tail end of uh, the height of COVID-19.
Hmm.
And so a lot of prices were increased. Um, Per unit, the last production run was about $104.15. We anticipate the next round to be around 95. But the 95 actually also includes many iterations, that
Hmm.
I mentioned. And a few that I didn't mention, I think the solar panel will have a cover. We'll have dividers in the pack. So right now it's kind of just like sort of like a pit,
Hmm.
but we'll have dividers. And we're actually looking to condense the size of the outer shell a little bit, make it more. Right now, the edges are a little rough, so if you bang into someone, it probably isn't the most comfortable.
Well, now you have done one project where you sold some of these to the Palo Alto Veterans Administration Hospital. Have groups been contacting you about bringing Makeshift Traveler to other states and communities?
Yeah, we get a lot of inquiries. It's kind of interesting navigating like who's people are a bit vague when they reach out because
Hmm.
they don't know if we are going to sell them to them or they want us to donate to them. But our philosophy has always been to serve as many people as we can serve, especially with a pack like that. So um, if government agencies are willing to support our organization, that just in turn supports more packs that we're able to eventually deliver. So
So what is the relationship when, for instance, how did the VA in Palo Alto work with you?
yeah, so it was working with the government is a pretty interesting experience. It was pretty as people can imagine, pretty bureaucratic. Like it was
Mhm.
very to the point. Uh, we want 60 units. We sent them what we're willing to sell them for, and they checked it off. It was about a 2 month process of being vendorized. But yeah, it was very simple. And I think it alludes to how a lot of organizations are able to go from grassroots to being large scale is
Mhm.
just working with agencies like that.
I want to get into more of that. Let's take a quick commercial break. We're going to be right back to continue the discussion. Now let's get back to the discussion with Zac Clark, founder and executive director of the HomeMore Project in San Francisco, which distributes the high-tech backpack, the Makeshift Traveler, to homeless people to connect them with vital services. So you described yourself when we last talked as naive about fundraising in San Francisco. What have you learned about how to stand up and get funding for a project like this that's dedicated to a dire social challenge like homelessness?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I was naive when we first connected. I have the awareness of what to do now. And hopefully the next time we talk, I can say that I was successful at doing this. It's really challenging. And, there are hundreds of nonprofits, even in such a small region like San Francisco. And it's quite challenging. What we've tried to do is break up our board into three main committees that
Mm.
outline ways that we fundraise as an organization. So the first being individual relations. So this is day-to-day donors that would find us through social media, um, website, things like that. We have corporate relations, which focuses on, foundation grants, trusts, uh, corporate social responsibility. And then we have government affairs, and that's pretty self-explanatory: government contracts, government grants. So I think in the future, we aim for the government affairs committee to make up anywhere from 60 to 70% of our total funding.
Mhm.
Right now, it's about 5. So I think that's where we have a lot of room to grow.
So, what's your advice for somebody who's thinking about launching a nonprofit? I mean, you did it in school. what would you suggest to somebody as a first few steps to understand the challenge and tackle it?
Yeah, I think the first thing is deciding, of course, how you're going to separate yourself from all the other nonprofits that exist.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the assumption would be if you're starting a nonprofit, you probably know what the focus of the organization is going to be. And then secondly, it's not always the most fun thing to chat about, but you have to understand what the financials and the revenue model is. Um, you know, I think a lot of times we mistake nonprofit for non-revenue.
Yeah.
And, nonprofits, just like a for-profit, just like a VC firm, anything else, you have to generate revenue to cover basic costs and grow the organization. And I think lastly, I always like talking about this with other, people on different sides of the spectrum, but, understanding the relationship between the end user and then the spender. Like in for-profits, this is usually the same person, unless it's a gift. But in nonprofits, your end user is not the spender. And so finding that relationship between what does the spender want to see, what does the end user want to see, and then trying to merge that into something.
Yeah, I agree that client relationship in the public setting is so important. But the funder, if it's the government, that's a citizen. If it's a private entity, it's not a citizen. So what is the relationship? And those are very complicated roads to travel. What did you learn? What did you learn about the relationship between donors and the homeless?
Yeah, I mean, I share an example just of kind of a moral dilemma that I have every time I go out into the community. And actually today, we're going to a safe sleeping site in the Mission District in San Francisco, and we're giving about 15 packs to people that are sleeping in tents there. And the person that's helping me on our team is our videographer. And we have a goal to create a new updated short promotional video.
Mm-hmm.
And so, there's this moral dilemma between, helping these people and then trying to showcase it in a video form because that's what people supporting you want to see.
Right.
But it's not always the easiest. Like, oh, by the way, can we interview you and film you when you're at a vulnerable state?
Well, and it almost represents some kind of a quid pro quo, which is not what you want to introduce. The idea that you have to do this to get this, and it could be perceived that way.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, and we've even experienced that many times before that, people will be in a waiting line to come up and eat with us and get a pack. And we like to get pictures of people and share their story on our website. But, people will kind of come up and if I have to get a picture, I don't think, I don't want to get a picture. It's always totally fine. Like that's okay. So yeah, it's just it's the day and age that we live in, right? Everything has to be showcased because if we aren't showcasing our work, then are you really doing anything? It's hard to know.
It's the if no one was there to hear the tree fall, did it make a sound problem? Social media, blessing and a curse. Now you have a transitional program to help people move into a shelter and ultimately into work and a home. How's that continued to evolve? It was very aggressive, 27 steps when we talked last year. Where are you with that today?
Well, people convinced me to eliminate the branding of 27 steps. I think that is pretty aggressive. It's overbearing for a lot of people to understand. But I think what I wanted to convey with that messaging is to address someone experiencing homelessness entirely, it does take a lot of different steps. And we've since called it our transitional housing program as we wait to decide on what the next or hopefully the final name will be for that. But that program is still very much in its development. We have numerous documents supporting research that we're willing to share with people that are interested, but a lot of that is just kept internal right now, as admittedly, most of our focus has been on the Makeshift Traveler program that we just launched.
Now, you can think of the Makeshift Traveler as a platform, a technology platform, and you can layer services on top of something like that. Have you explored adding payments or work programs or additional technology to support other connections to social services on top of the capabilities of the Makeshift Traveler?
Yeah, I think we've scratched the surface of that. When we connect with people, as I mentioned, we take a picture, we put them up on our blog if they want to, and then we share their stories. But the headline uh, almost always is their name and then their previous occupation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that employability is one aspect of someone getting out of homelessness, but it could be the primary reason that someone does, and we've seen that. And so I say that we've scratched the surface because we have the ability on our website for people to see previous employability and then also be able to donate if they're interested. But has that happened yet? No.
Okay.
But I think that it's certainly a possibility. And a lot of the people that we meet are, former like hands-on type of jobs, construction, plumbing, and these are skills that while may have, you know, decreased a little bit, can certainly be revamped. So I think that that's a huge opportunity for people to re-enter working.
When we also talked last year, you spoke about the importance of small businesses' role in getting the homeless some assistance. And San Francisco, almost more than any other city in the country, has been really harshly impacted by the pandemic. Is the city coming back, and do you see those small businesses and government tuning into the problem and contributing to solutions to the homeless problem?
Yeah, I think to answer the first part, the city's not coming back.
Okay.
I think that a lot of the organizations that we work with, and both government agencies and whatnot, I think they'll acknowledge that it'll be a few years before San Francisco looks somewhat similar to what it was pre-pandemic. Um, and a lot of that, I think, is just the nature of the economic cycle of when you go into such a downturn of the city, uh, it takes time to bounce back and the businesses circulate. And so I think we're a few years away from it being like that. But um, yeah, I mean, the unique part about it is there's new restaurants that are always popping up, and yeah, it's an interesting time to be here.
And do you see business recognizing that part of their engagement with the community involves their addressing the homeless problem on the streets in front of their storefront?
I would say that it's become pretty divided, where
Mm-hmm.
most of the small businesses kind of are just looking at the government to fix the issue. And, I mean, we had, I think it was fall of last year, uh, the entire Tenderloin formed a coalition, and about 160 businesses, refused to pay taxes. I don't know what the outcome of that was. I'm guessing they ended up paying them, um, but so I think we're seeing a little bit of pushback from small businesses.
Well, society is a team sport.
Hmm.
What are the 3 or 4 critical steps you suggest that we take to prevent homelessness in the first place, and to help those people who do end up on the street?
Yeah, I mean, I always like to separate these types of questions into two separate groups. And there's a population of those experiencing homelessness that are severely addicted, and they need help that someone who's experiencing homelessness for employment or economic reasons may not need. And so
Mhm.
addressing those two different groups is looks entirely different. Speaking to the economic reasons, I think it all starts with uh, just a connection and a relationship. And I challenge people to just communicate with those that are homeless like they would anyone else. And we talk about housing first, and I always like to say people first. Like it
Mhm.
starts with a connection and some sort of trust. So I think that, the first step in any of it is recognizing people who are unhoused as individuals that have gone through a series of challenges that have led them to this. And we need to communicate with them like anyone else. Um, and I think addressing the other side, it's tricky. Harm reduction has been a big part of addressing those suffering from addiction in recent years. I think that it's like any other program, it's experienced some great success. It's also had a lot of great failure. And interestingly enough, actually yesterday, Mayor Breed announced that they would begin arresting people that were openly using. So I think it's a very complex situation that needs to be looked at independent of just housing.
Well, you're hitting on a really important thing when you talk about recognizing these people as individuals. How we define who we are is very important. That's what we're talking about when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion is the definition of we. And we tend to think of the homeless as not part of society. In fact, I probably used some language which would reinforce that perspective. Sorry about that. If we were to help these people, based on the experience that you've had working with them, help them systematically, what kinds of value and creativity could we unlock? Could we solve some problems by bringing these people into our bigger we?
Totally. Yeah, I think, my favorite thing when I connect with people is just learning about their interests or learning about their hobbies. And, I've met so many people that are incredibly talented, from artists to musicians, a lot of interests that don't necessarily directly translate to economic success, but they're valuable in many different ways to society. And so, looking at how can someone who's unhoused but makes incredible art, how can we leverage their art as a way to connect with people and get out of homelessness? So I think there's so much creativity and value. And, as I've said so many times, it's not like the people who are actually experiencing homelessness, it's tragic. And that's a huge part of the equation, but it's also you and me, right? It's also the tourists that come here. It's also the small businesses, right? I think we're all invested in helping these people, helping the situation. And, it's undoubtedly, we don't hurt anyone by helping these people. It's only up from here. So
that again, an important perspective. The idea that we don't hurt anyone by helping these folks is critical, because there's this kind of they're taking from us perspective that's argued from the other side of the conversation. And what we're also doing is raising all boats in the more traditional sense that the United States invested in the mid-century, last century. Your project is so important. How can listeners support HomeMore, and where can they do that?
Yeah, I always say if you want to financially support us, you can go to the HomeMoreProject.org. Big donate button on the right. And then if you want to support us through ideas or feedback on our programs, you can go to the HomeMoreProject.org as well and reach out to us and let us know your thoughts. I'm really big on involving other people into our programs, so would love the feedback.
I also noticed that you can do an Amazon Smile opt-in to support HomeMore now, so that part of your purchases go there. Is that something that you recommend people do?
Totally. Excuse me. Yeah, we'd love Amazon Smile, GoFundMe. There's a lot of unique ways to contribute to us. So.
Zac, again, great work and fantastic to see the progress that you've made. Good luck in grad school.
Thank you, Mitch. Thanks for having me.
That was my conversation with Zac Clark, founder and executive director of the HomeMore Project in San Francisco. You can learn more about the program and donate to support the delivery of more Makeshift Traveler backpacks at thehomemoreproject.org. The HomeMore Project is all one word, no space, no dash, thehomemoreproject.org. And if you haven't designated an organization to support when shopping on Amazon, consider choosing the HomeMore Project as your Amazon Smile Charity. It will do good, folks. The plight of the homeless, who often become unmoored from their family and community because they cannot afford the digital connectivity on which our modern economy is built, can be instructive for those of us who are thinking about sustainability too. As Zac mentioned, how we define our community, who we count as part of the we that must be considered and cared for when making economic and political decisions, is critical to building an inclusive prosperity. The sustainability disconnect for many of us is that they do not see themselves as part of nature, but separate from it. And that choice blinds us to many of the factors that contribute to climate change. When we can find empathy for people who are struggling with homelessness, addiction, or mental issues, we can widen the discussion and think about systemic changes that could help prevent the plight affecting almost 600,000 Americans. And that humanizing step could also be applied to opening the mental door to seeing, for instance, endangered species and wilderness that is at risk of being lost as important co-residents on a small planet with limited resources. Understanding and empathy are keys to our ability to change. The HomeMore Project is one more example among many of how seeing new paths to solving the polycrisis affecting our world can be transformative. Folks, I hope you'll take a moment to share this podcast or any of the more than 400 interviews that we've done on sustainability in your ear with your friends, family, and coworkers. If you take a moment to write a review on your favorite podcast platform, that will make all the difference in the world in helping them find us. Please tell everyone that you can find us at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, or any of the other fine purveyors of podcast goodness you might know or prefer. Thank you so much for your support. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe. This is Earth911, and we will be back with another innovator interview soon. In the meantime, folks, take care of yourself, take care of one another, and let's all take care of this beautiful planet of ours. Have a green day.